As someone who has been deeply immersed in the world of F1 for far too many years, it feels somewhat counterintuitive to list the flaws and weaknesses of every single F1 driver on the 2024 grid. Yet, every driver, regardless of their skill, benefits from constructive criticism from the F1 community to push themselves further. Many of these drivers are exceptionally talented, making it genuinely challenging to pinpoint a definitive weakness. So, I've decided to take a more creative approach to uncovering some of these vulnerabilities, even if, for some specific drivers, it was, well, kind of easy. Prepare to uncover the surprising flaws of your favorite drivers on the 2024 grid. Max Verstappen is, by far, one of the hardest drivers to identify a weakness for. He stands as one of the most dominant figures in Formula One history, and as Lewis Hamilton himself once put it, he was faultless during the 2023 season. But before you conclude that no one can stop Max Verstappen, you are very much mistaken. It seems the only person who can truly challenge Max Verstappen is, quite literally, his own father. Anecdotes aside, another notable weakness Max possesses is his patience. You know how Max and his engineer, GP, almost always seem to be having a couples therapy session mid-race. Most of the time, it stems from Max's impatience, where he's audibly frustrated, while GP sounds like he's enjoying a serene vacation in the Bahamas. Regardless, Max's impatience could genuinely lead him to make mistakes on track, though we haven't seen many in recent seasons. While impatience is a trait that can affect any driver, Max's intensely competitive character means he would do absolutely anything to win a race, even if it means clashing with a rival. Remember those moments when he and Lewis Hamilton have collided, resulting in both cars being out of the race. This shows that even a hint of impatience has the potential to cause significant errors in his driving, despite his immense skill and development. Lastly, and perhaps most crucially, Max needs a competitive teammate. There's a widely held belief that Red Bull strategically pairs Max with drivers who are good, but not quite on his level. Max thrives with a team player, not a rival in identical machinery. We saw the complexities of a highly competitive teammate dynamic back in 2016. Honestly, Max would have faced far more challenges during the 2023 season if Sergio Perez had been consistently more competitive, rather than sometimes appearing to drive in a less demanding series. Remember when everyone anticipated an absolutely insane Red Bull title fight? That lasted about as long as Nick de Vries's tenure in F1. Just imagine if Charles Leclerc, or even Lewis Hamilton, or Fernando Alonso became Max's teammate. This scenario would either lead to the most anticipated final title decider in Formula One history, or the most teammate collisions the sport has ever seen. Lando Norris is another incredibly talented driver, but finding a weakness for him was relatively straightforward. One of his primary vulnerabilities lies in unfortunate strategy calls, whether made by him or his team. Lando could have secured his maiden race win in Russia 2021, but after a stressful decision not to pit for intermediate tires in the rain, Lando squandered that victory. In another instance, during the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix, McLaren made a questionable call to keep him out in the rain, which immediately proved to be the worst decision. While there have been worse strategy calls in F1 history, McLaren's decision that day was particularly egregious. The ironic part was Lando being told he was faster than cars on intermediate tires, even as they were actively overtaking him. It seems McLaren has recently been channeling their inner Ferrari. Due to these incidents, Lando Norris appears to have developed an allergy to race wins, which is another of his weaknesses, almost feeling like a curse. I'm convinced that by the year 2100, Lando will still be chasing his first race win, perpetually driving his McLaren looking dejected. Every time Lando inches close to a victory, another driver seems to edge him out by a tiny margin, or he simply fumbles the opportunity completely. It's a genuine curse. Another weakness Lando possesses is his tendency to be a PR team's nightmare. While he might not be causing as much controversy as some, there's rarely a media moment where Lando isn't saying something slightly questionable. The McLaren PR team is constantly on high alert when Lando is around, and it sometimes feels like he needs to be prevented from answering interviews because he is simply too expressive. Now we come to the interesting case of Lance Stroll. Immediately, one of Lance's weaknesses is his often erratic driving. Many fans argue that he hasn't significantly elevated his skills over his 7 seasons in Formula One, and his performance in the 2023 season occasionally made it seem as if he had never driven a race car before. Remember that Drive to Survive clip where Lance declared, "Under pressure, diamonds are made." Well, the moment he had a car capable of competing for podiums, he squandered the opportunity almost every single time. He's so adept at creating chaos that he nearly compromised Fernando Alonso's first race with the team by making contact. Lance has never been able to remotely keep pace with Alonso, who was practically fighting for the Constructors' Championship single-handedly. This really points to a skill deficit for Lance. This brings us to another of Lance's flaws, his inconsistencies. Literally once a year, Lance manages to drive with the brilliance of an Ayrton Senna, but for the rest of the season, his biggest inspiration seems to be the inconsistent form of a past F1 driver often compared to him. Let's also not forget that Lance is turning into a pseudo-Kimi Räikkönen. He gives the shortest answers in his post-race interviews. The crucial difference, however, is that Kimi delivered short answers after driving like a champion, whereas Lance often delivers them after a challenging performance. Nico Hülkenberg is one of the most underrated F1 drivers out there, whom I occasionally root for. However, I can't ignore the fact that this man seems genuinely allergic to podiums. Nico, you've come incredibly close on multiple occasions, only to lose out due to bad luck or a driver error, much like watching a beloved animated race car lose to his rival. Another weakness many fans identify in Nico is his consistent lack of a truly competitive car, especially during his current tenure at Haas. He has frequently pushed that challenging car into Q3, but because the race pace of that car is often abysmal and it devours tires, Nico is frequently forced to yield positions as the car simply cannot maintain pace. We've seen Nico deliver some amazing drives during his time as a reserve driver for Racing Point and during his stint at Renault. The man possesses immense talent and skill, but he just can't seem to get close to victory, either due to an uncompetitive car, terrible luck, or making a crucial driver error when he's right on the cusp of success. Another weakness to highlight is that Nico doesn't appear to be fully committed to F1 long-term. It feels like he's there to do what he can, but doesn't necessarily plan to stay in the sport for an extended period, which leaves little room for significant driver development. This is completely understandable, as he has a family and is reaching an age where many drivers typically retire. Charles Leclerc is the next driver on this list, and honestly, he's probably the most amusing to analyze. Leclerc is arguably the easiest driver to identify weaknesses for. His number one weakness is Ferrari itself, not just their strategy, but the entire team. I've stopped trying to understand their issues, because the team has made too many fundamental errors for me to classify it solely as strategy calls, even if those can sometimes be absolutely abysmal. Charles being at Ferrari is both a blessing and a curse. In one instance, he can have the fastest car on track, only to be completely undermined by the team's pit stops, poor strategy calls, and an unreliable race engineer who might be too focused on trivial matters. His unwavering loyalty to the team is both honorable and, at times, baffling. Monaco is another significant weakness for Charles. Every time he races there, it seems he either makes contact with the barriers or achieves a mediocre result. Last year, in 2023, wasn't too bad, with Ferrari finally making some decent strategy calls, perhaps to recover from the disastrous Monaco 2022. The final point is Charles's struggle with understanding the car's limits. In the 2023 season and many others, Charles, in his pursuit of maximum performance, sometimes pushes too far, forgetting the car's true capabilities. This often leads to incidents where he pushes the car to its absolute limits, sometimes at the expense of losing control. While I understand Charles's drive to extract every ounce of performance, repeatedly making contact with the barriers makes it very difficult for him to secure good race results and places a significant burden on the team for repairs, especially when he converts pole positions into crashes. He needs to recognize how far he can push and avoid forcing the car to achieve lap times it simply cannot deliver. Beyond knowing the car's limits, Charles also needs to recognize his own. Despite his immense talent, if he finds that sweet spot between pushing hard and overdriving, Charles could easily become an even more formidable driver in F1. Sergio Perez's primary weakness is that his driving style, which favors an understeery car with a predictable rear, fundamentally clashes with the Red Bull car's design, which is not built to be driven effectively in that manner. A car that simply doesn't fit his driving style is what prevents Sergio from performing consistently well in F1, highlighting his need to work on adaptability and flexibility as a driver. As Alex Albon once explained in an interview, the Red Bull car is meticulously fine-tuned for ultimate speed, which often means it's prone to oversteer. Sergio and his driving style simply cannot extract the car's full potential, whereas Max's driving style aligns perfectly with the car's design philosophy. This situation bears a strong resemblance to Daniel Ricciardo's struggles at McLaren, though Sergio hasn't yet been paid millions to depart. Folding under pressure is another of Sergio's weaknesses. Quickly after the initial races of the 2023 season, his chances of snatching the championship from Max plummeted from slightly possible to virtually non-existent, even negative. It's a common challenge for teammates to struggle keeping up with Max, especially if their driving style doesn't suit the car. Consequently, Sergio is compelled to take more risks and faces immense pressure to remain competitive against Max, particularly given the intense scrutiny within the Red Bull team and the high expectations from fans and media. Now, I know many of you are expecting something very critical regarding Logan Sargent, but let me tell you something. Logan Sargent is, without a doubt, the best Formula One driver to ever exist in all of history. Just look at his statistics. His points in 2023. 1. But how many points did Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, and Sebastian Vettel get in 2023? Exactly. Absolutely none. Therefore, I conclude that Logan Sargent is the best Formula One driver to ever exist, with no weaknesses whatsoever. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to grasp what a kilometer is, which might explain why he frequently has incidents. He probably doesn't even know the speed he's going at. Beyond Logan's tendency to drive somewhat erratically, and his consistent encounters with the barriers in almost every race, another flaw he has is that his entire public personality seems to revolve around him being American. Don't get me wrong, patriotism and all that are fine, but it's almost as if that's all he has to offer. I understand it was his first year in Formula One, but Oscar Piastri, despite being a more reserved person, has shown more distinct personality. While this doesn't directly relate to Logan's driving, his lack of a unique personality makes it harder for fans to connect with him as a driver and for him to become a fan favorite. Though, based on what little he has to offer, I still find myself somewhat liking the guy. As I've mentioned before, ego is one of Esteban Ocon's biggest flaws as a driver. He defends to a dangerously aggressive degree against his teammates compared to other drivers, putting both himself and the team's results at risk. This likely stems from his desire to be perceived as the superior driver within the team, a goal I don't inherently disagree with. However, the methods Esteban employs to achieve this are simply unacceptable. His ego, and the drive to be seen as the dominant driver, is a deep-rooted issue, causing his on-track decisions to sometimes lack intelligence and common sense. Now, before anyone comes after me in the comments section for critiquing Esteban or any other driver on the grid, please understand that this reflects the perspective of a significant portion of the F1 community, which I am simply highlighting. So, before anyone posts a comment more absurd than Esteban's defensive maneuvers, please watch the entire video. Likability is another issue for Ocon, primarily caused by his ego and behavior. I used to be a huge fan until his behavior started to dominate headlines in the 2023 season. He collided with Fernando Alonso during a qualifying session, and, without hesitation, immediately placed the blame on Alonso both during and after the session. His conviction that he was in the right is as misguided as me thinking I have a chance with women as an F1 fan. Esteban's struggles with likability are preventing him from reaching his full potential in F1, not just as a skilled driver, but as someone cherished by fans. F1 isn't solely about skill. Personality plays a crucial role. There's a reason teams invest so much time planning PR activities for their drivers, to gain more fans and traction. If Esteban continues with this kind of behavior, it will hinder fans from finding a reason to support him. Many people believe Lewis Hamilton's main weakness is Max Verstappen, or Fernando Alonso, or even Toto Wolff. But once again, you are 100% wrong. Lewis Hamilton's greatest weakness, which I think everyone knows by now, is Michael Masi. Without Michael Masi, Lewis would probably have already retired with his 8th world title. But because of the controversial Abu Dhabi 2021, and arguably the entire 2021 season, Lewis is still relentlessly pursuing that 8th championship, which perhaps explains his occasional gestures. On a more serious note, as much as I admire every driver on the grid, including Lewis Hamilton, his main weakness is his race starts. Remember when Lewis secured pole position in the Hungarian Grand Prix? You probably don't, because he lost that lead almost immediately. It makes you wonder what goes through his mind. Baku 2021 is another infamous moment where Lewis's weakness in race starts became glaringly apparent. He isn't necessarily bad at them, but he is notoriously inconsistent. At least we got one of F1's most iconic screams after that restart. Another one of Lewis's bad habits is his tendency to complain on the radio. Remember when Lewis constantly called out other drivers for track limits, only to receive a 5-second penalty for it himself? You probably do, because during that race, Lewis kept complaining on his radio throughout the entire event, which was arguably the only entertaining part of it. Many suggest that Lewis could have channeled that energy into focusing intensely on the race. Toto Wolff even had to tell him to stop talking about the car and just drive it. I won't lie, I don't entirely blame Lewis for complaining, as that car was an absolute disaster, and Toto probably couldn't have done much better anyway. Kevin Magnussen is probably one of the most inconsistent drivers on the grid. In 2022, he performed quite well, notably scoring a P5 in the first race. However, in the 2023 season, he significantly underperformed and was consistently outdriven by Nico Hülkenberg. While some might argue that Kevin is consistent, it's often in his underperformance. Kevin can also sometimes be quite reckless on track, though thankfully, we haven't seen much of that in the 2023 season. Let's not forget Kevin's unique relationship with his number one friend, a pole position. The moment Kevin secured pole position in the São Paulo Grand Prix back in 2022, 9 months later, a new soul came into the world. Let's keep this man away from pole positions. If he had as many poles as Lewis Hamilton, he'd probably have enough children to field multiple junior racing teams. Now, I know many of you are wondering why I didn't include the other 10 drivers, and that's a valid question. The answer is simply that I became quite exhausted making this video. It's already around 20 minutes long, and including the other 10 drivers would have extended it to 40 minutes. I don't want you all watching an entire documentary about me constantly critiquing F1 drivers. Don't get me wrong, it's somewhat enjoyable, especially when it comes to drivers like Lance Stroll. But I understand some of you might want to see fan favorites like Daniel Ricciardo, Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri, and Alex Albon analyzed. So what I'm going to do is make this a 2-part series. I figured that's probably the best approach for this video. I'll see you all in my next video, where I'll likely make some truly terrible jokes that won't make anyone laugh. See you in the next one.